Welcome to Crimson Clues, where shadows hide secrets and silence reveals the truth. Every story is a puzzle, and every clue takes you closer to the answer. Subscribe now, join the hunt, and let the mystery begin. Chapter 1. The Girl with the Silver Cigarette Case. If any city has been resolved to be modern in every phrase of its name, it is New York. We had not intended to see it at all. Our true destination was farther south, where Poirot had been summoned to testify in an inheritance lawsuit before the Belgian consulate in Mexico. However, the great liners make pauses where commerce requires. So we disembarked in Manhattan for several days, while waiting for the United Fruit Line's next voyage. I believe I was the most enthusiastic of the two of us. The towers, the yellow cabs, the noise and color, it was all so alive. Poirot, on the other hand, regarded the city with the same level of skepticism that he would normally reserve for an ill-boiled egg. "It pushes upward, Hastings," he observed as we stood in front of the pale colossus of the Flatiron Building, always upward like a toddler on stilts. "But does it remain secure, Hein? It's not beauty, it's audacity." We had just settled into our Fifth Avenue hotel when an old acquaintance of Poirot, a Belgian banker now thriving on Wall Street, called to pay his respects. This led by the typical alchemy of polite society to our inclusion in a dinner hosted by Mrs. Cornelia Van Allen, a lady whose pearls appeared to have been strung by the gods of finance themselves. Mrs. Van Allen was determined to show us the true New York. For her, this didn't imply museums or monuments, but a nightclub called the Silver Gull, where one of the city's most talked-about cigarettes girls had previously danced with the Ziegfeld Follies. "You cannot say you have seen America," she declared, "unless you have seen Celeste Larue." Poirot, I believe, would have gladly declined. But Mrs. Van Allen's invites had the force of royal orders, and we found ourselves that evening descending into an underground realm of blue lights, syncopated rhythms, and cocktails of questionable legality. The room had a long, low ceiling, a stage at one end and a polished floor in the middle, where couples swayed to the music of a tiny but energetic orchestra. The air smelt of tobacco aroma, and that strange sweetness that indicates the presence of illicit liquor. Poirot leaned towards me and said, "Observe, Hastings. The women are millimeter precise. The short hair, the scarlet shout, the shorter outfit than yesterday. Le moderne." "They're flappers, Poirot," I told him, hoping to demonstrate some knowledge with local idioms. "Ah, fluttering. It refers to a movement." He gave a slight fluttering gesture with his fingers and smiled. "It's pretty." The dance floor was surrounded by tables, each with a small shaded bulb casting a secretive glow. Cigarette girls wandered among the guests, thin-bobbed young women carrying trays. Each tray serves as a portable shop for temptations such as cigarettes, cigars, chocolates, and small silver lighters. They were like lyrics from the same poem, and men paid for the refrain with subtle tips in exchange. Mrs. Van Allen stated it with the satisfaction of exposing a treasure, which is the most lovely of them all. Celeste Larue was a Follies girl before the controversy. Everyone recognizes her. Everyone admires her. Nobody aids her. The girl indicated Celeste and stood slightly away. The tray balanced comfortably against one hip. She possessed the lightness of a dancer even at rest, the sort of balance one sees in a good horse, poised yet ready to move. It's pointless to pretend differently. Her face struck one first as lovely, then as human. The features are regular as if sketched. The eyes are huge and overly expressive, and the lamps are slightly turned up. Her outfit was black, making her complexion look like milk in a dark glass, and on her wrist was a narrow band of silver that caught the lamp and reproduced it in small languages. "Before the scandal?" I asked. "Oh, my darling, this is one of those theatrical nonsense stories. A highly wealthy and respectable gentleman expressed an interest. The papers claimed one thing, the attorneys another, and Mr. Respectability returned to his wife and clubs. Celeste came here. And what is the name of the gentleman?" Poe inquired with the gentleness of a cat that has discovered cream. Mrs. Van Allen inclined her head. "You must excuse me, Miss Poe. In New York we are modern, but we are not insane. Some names are never mentioned in rooms where men understand how to sue." Celeste had drifted closer by this point, and whether by chance or by the strange tide that transports one person to another in a crowd, she came to settle at our table. She looked down at Poirot's moustaches and smiled, a small surprise smile as if the ornaments had welcomed her. "Cigarettes, gentlemen, chocolates." I have both vices on special tonight. Thank you, mademoiselle. I don't smoke, remarked Poirot, but I admire how efficiently others do. She laughed quickly and lightly. That's the word for New York, efficiency. We wrap our transgressions in nickel and cellophane. Mrs. Van Allen introduced us. Celeste, this is the well-known Belgian investigator and his close friend, who are only down the street from the ship. Celeste responded with a half-mocking, half-sweet curtsy. She claimed that famous investigators are unlucky for girls. We learnt about them after the event. I recall the turn of her word, which struck me as brilliant at the time but now returns like a whistled line in a dark street. But I'm ahead of myself. Poirot asked if you were familiar with the stage. Yes, she responded simply. I was a Shine, a chorus member at the New Amsterdam, and a Ziegfeld girl for a bit. When the floor is clear and the boss is not looking, I continue to dance. Then dance now, Mrs. Van Allen said. I shall tip the band into obedience. Celeste looked around the room before placing her tray onto the edge of a pillar and stepped into the small vacuum between tables with the most beautiful shrug I'd ever seen. The band, bribed by our hostess, transitioned from a foxtrot to something more fluid. It wasn't a tango or anything I knew, but it fit her. She didn't perform. She immersed herself in the music, as if she were entering a bath at the ideal temperature. Heads turned. Even the waiters' trays appeared to pause in mid-air. Mondu breathed. There's the geometry of grace. There was a round of applause after she finished. New York is too sophisticated to clap loudly, unless someone is profiting from it. So she returned for her tray with a small gesture of appreciation. It was then that I spotted a gentleman at the far table who had not watched the dance or the dancer, but rather the entire room. He was fit, muscular in the jaw, and dressed appropriately in a dinner jacket that appeared to have grown on him rather than been sewed. A man with commanding habits, possibly in finance or politics. One of his eyelids had a faint languid droop that may be due to amusement or disinterest. I couldn't say which. Who is that? I asked Mrs. Van Allen. She didn't turn her head. He is no one at all, and that is the only safe answer. Celeste followed my gaze, and for a brief moment her serenity wavered. It was as simple as tightening a thread in a tapestry, but Poirot saw it as he sees everything. You know him, he inquired. Her smile returned, fearless as a paper fan. Everybody knows everyone here, Muir. It's our small village with really tall houses. A waiter approached Celeste and murmured something. She nodded once, took her tray and moved towards the corridor leading to the dressing rooms in the back. The fid gentleman stood there, made a show of welcoming an acquaintance, and then went casually, almost too casually, along the same corridor. I murmured, Poirot, under my breath, Yes, Hastings, I have eyes. Should we? We will not take any action at this time. One does not avoid every rendezvous, only because it may result in a financial disagreement. We didn't have much time to remain inactive. Perhaps not more than 10 minutes had gone. Mrs. Van Allen has ample time to flatter the band into a new attempt, and I'm hoping for another of those illicit highballs. When a sound came from behind, it was impossible to miss even in a nightclub. A woman's cry was muffled and quickly cut off, followed by the skitter of something metal on tile. The room hesitated in the same way that a complete thing does when stung. Poirot was already on his feet. Come, Hastings. We entered the corridor, which smelt like powder and damp plaster. A tiny staircase led to a service door in the alleyway. A cigarette case, the identical slim silver one I saw on Celeste's wrist, lay on the step, its chain snapping cleanly. Farther down, the door stood slightly open, breathing in the darkness. Poirot moved with economic efficiency and quickness. He felt the shattered chain with his gloved finger. He stated it was fresh. See, the linkages are still sprung. We emerged onto the lane that led behind the club and towards the river. It was one of those tight, echoing corridors in America that appear to have been created for the ease of criminals, lined with ash cans like a vicious band's drums. The night air was cooler than the chamber and smelt of stone, water, and industrial rather than pure countryside air. At the far end there was movement. A shadow detached from the larger shadow and vanished around the corner. "Halt!" exclaimed a voice behind us. It was the bouncer, too late and too indignant. Poirot disregarded him and strode forward at an astonishing speed. We turned the corner in a flash, only to be faced with nothing except the hollow rattle of the elevated line across the street and the rectangle of the river, black as a shut-eye between its lights. "There," Poirot said quietly. "At first I saw nothing. Then the water revealed its secret, a pale form where the dock's timbers created a little eddy. Two men sprinting from the street yelled for aid. Another plunged down to the lower ledge, reaching with a boat hook. They drew the form inward, and the lamplight, greasy and harsh, landed on a face I had seen 20 minutes earlier in blue music and joy. It was Celeste Larue. Her black, newly bobbed hair had fashioned itself into the dampness. Her eyes were closed. The silver bracelet that had been on her wrist had disappeared. A faint dark bruising appeared below the throat, a finger mark rather than a river mark. Poirot's touch on my sleeve reassured me. When he talked, his voice was as flat as if he were counting money. You perceive, Hastings. Not the water. That comes after. Something else existed before the water. I was strangled, but I managed. Possibly or nearly so, with the rest completed by the Hudson. We will not yet be clever. He drew himself really straight. The little figure of him instantly solidified, like a nail pounded true. Go back, my friend. Speak with the management. No one leaves. There is a phone. Call the cops. And Hastings, yes. Say just that there was an accident. When afraid, the murderer has good hearing. I went, and as I pushed back down the passage past the broken chain glinting like a busted promise, the orchestra within, still unaware that tragedy had come in from the alley like a draught, set up a new tune. The brasses laughed, the cymbal kissed the air, and somewhere near the front, a Florida gentleman in a fine dinner jacket called for his hat, as if he were always in a rush and never at a loss. Chapter 2. The Hudson Alley. The Silver Gull's management demonstrated an admirable sense of self-preservation. I'd hardly told the maître about my assignment when he flicked his fingers at a waiter, sent him running for the phone, and ordered the door locked. Guests protested. One even threatened to contact his lawyer, but the man seemed unmoved. Lady drowned. He told the room in a monotone tone that suppressed debate. Police will seek statements. Don't you like it? Take it up with them. I found Poirot in the back, just inside the open service door, his diminutive body silhouetted against the fuzzy glow of the alley lamps. Two patrolmen were already present, one holding a notebook and the other directing the curious back inside. A sergeant, broad-shouldered and with a jaw that appeared to have been hammered into shape, was interviewing the bouncer. The inspector himself arrived, a large man with sandy hair, a nose that had been broken at least twice, and the expression of someone who has learnt to approach life with skepticism first and then cordiality. He peered at the body, which had been brought up to the pier on a stretcher, and then at Poirot with a mix of irritation and fascination. So you are? Poirot bent slightly. Hercule Poirot is at your service. The sergeant murmured something into the inspector's ear. The man's eyebrows rose. The Hercule Poirot, a Belgian detective. Poirot bowed his head modestly. The same. I'm in New York on pawn on my way to Mexico. And tonight, Monhe, I find myself sadly a witness. A witness? The inspector's tone was suspicious. The name is O'Malley. Inspector Daniel O'Malley, NYPD, homicide. He took a cigar from his pocket and chewed on it unlit. You may be a big deal in Europe, mister, but here we do things the American way, just to be clear. May Nature responded with exasperating calm. Statements were taken at once. The bouncer testified that no one had gone out except the girl, and later, a chap in a tux about 50, with a large red face. That description could only belong to the Florida man I had spotted earlier. Mrs. Van Allen confirmed that he had gone just before the cry was heard. Ali jotted down his name, Franklin D. Raw. Banker with a lot of money, many friends and figures. He spit out a piece of tobacco. So let's see if his friends can get him out of this situation. Poirot crouched over the silver cigarette case that still lay on the stairs. He studied the snap chain and measured the links against his thumbnail. It was broken in violence, he mumbled. The girl struggled. Sure, she struggled, Ali admitted. Raw tries to come too close. She yells, he panics, and he pointed toward the river. Poirot's mustaches twitched. Perhaps, however, noticed there are no blemishes on the metal itself. It was pulled sharply and cleanly, along with the casing. Examine the monogram. I bent closer. The lid was elegantly etched with the initials CL. Celeste Larue, I announced. Just so, said Poirot, but that is curious. Why was the chain broken on the staircase, and the body discovered so far down the alley? O'Malley snapped as she ran. He grasped her by the wrist, broke the chain, then he mimed a throttling action. You don't need a Belgian detective to figure it out. Pooh grinned slightly. No, indeed. However, often a simple explanation is enough to blind us. We were led back inside while a patrolman blocked up the alleyway. The visitors, agitated and outraged, were led into groups to make their statements. Cigarette smoke mixed with anxiety. In one corner, Mrs. Van Allen dabbed at her nose with a lace handkerchief, saying loudly that New York was no longer safe for a lady. Poe and I were led into a small office where O'Malley questioned us more officially. I recounted what little we had witnessed. Celeste's dance, her departure with the platter, the fed man following suit, and the whale. Poirot just added his observations about the broken chain and the sequence of events. When the inspector was done scribbling, he sat back in his chair. "All right, gentlemen. You are free to leave the city, but please notify me first." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "I promise you that I have no desire to depart before the truth is discovered." Ali gave a quick laugh. "That is my job, friend. Yours is to appreciate the jazz." We arrived at the motel shortly before 3:00, both of us silent for the whole of the journey. After the taxi had left and we were standing in the foyer, Poirot quietly whispered, "There is something here, Hastings, that does not please me." The young woman was stunning. Yes, too gorgeous. Unfortunately, such women attract moths as much as flames. "Do you mean Rock?" "Perhaps it is him or someone else." "Mon ami, when you saw her dancing, did she gaze at him?" I considered. Not once. She looked at us and the room in general, but never at him. Exactro spoke gently. "And yet when you mentioned his presence, she faltered." "Why, because she knew him," I proposed. Poe nodded. "Yes, but did she dread him or what others would learn about him? That's the question." The following morning's newspapers splashed the story across their front pages. The Herald reported that a Ziegfeld girl had been found dead in Hudson. Celeste Leroux asked the Daily Graphic about her romance with a financier. Every paper hinted at a scandal, and every paper mentioned the same name, Franklin D. Rocks. We had just completed breakfast when Inspector Ali arrived at the motel. He appeared less blustering and more tired in daylight, but his tone was harsh. "I thought you might like to know that Poirot has already hired a lawyer, one of the best. He claims he left the club early to meet a friend uptown, and the friend confirms this. Alibi is solid." "What about the time?" Poirot asked. Poirot pursed his lips as he stated that he had never seen the girl. "If that's true, who was the shadow we saw on the alley corner?" Ali's eyes narrowed. "That is exactly what I want to know. And since you appear so bright, perhaps you will tell me." Poirot just smiled. "Perhaps in time, but for now, may I see the girl's effects?" Ali hesitated and then shrugged. "They're in the precinct. You are welcome to join us. Please don't get in my way." At the station, we were shown a little collection including a silver case with a broken chain, a compact, a pair of dance shoes, and a few notes tied with ribbon. Poe scrutinized each item as if it were a precious artifact. "The shoes look, Hastings, they are worn but carefully cared for. The compact is cheap, but the cigarette case is of high quality." Ali grumbled, possibly referring to sterling silver as a present, or she bought with the tips she received from wealthy men. Poirot shook his head. No, this is too personal. It was etched. A casual girl's trinket is not engraved. No, this refers to attachment." He unfurled the letters, checked the signatures, and looked up sharply. "But these are interesting. They are merely signed with initials. J.H., let me guess," Ali remarked bitterly. "Not Roar, no, it's someone else." Poe tapped the ribbon on his chin. "Someone who wished to be invisible." He laid down the letters and glanced at both of us. His eyes had that same brilliant, steely glitter. "Messieurs, we're about to take a big risk. And in New York, the waters of the Hudson hold many secrets." Chapter 3. Girls' Rooms and the Gentleman's Name. Newspapers have a way of resolving issues before juries are called. By lunchtime, Franklin D. Rock's name was being tossed around in headlines like a terrier on a rat. By 2 his lawyer had hammered the same headlines with a statement as glossy as a club window. He hadn't seen Celeste that night. He left to meet a colleague on Madison Avenue. The colleague, Mr. Isaacson, of a good banking address, confirmed the appointment and its time. Thus, the press informed us that the catastrophe was a tragic misadventure, and if they couldn't quite blame the river, they were satisfied to condemn New York in general, and nightclubs in particular, of a lack of morals. Poe, a botanist who studies weeds, folded the Herald and simply stated, "When the truth is inconvenient, she travels under an alias." Inspector Ali met us at 3:30, with the air of someone who despises collaborators but is determined to put up with them valiantly. "You wanted to see where the girl lived," he told me. "You'll keep your hands in your pockets and your ideas in your minds until I ask for them." Poirot smiled as he said, "My hands, my opinions." Unfortunately, they have separate timetables. The structure on West 47th was a tiny slice of red brick with shut-eye windows. The hallway smelled of cabbage, dust, and the ambition of girls who keep their shoes neatly paired under their beds. The landlady, a bony woman named Mrs. Keating, whose hair appeared to have been brushed into obedience rather than groomed, greeted us with a prim grief that had dried overnight into fury. "Her good girl," she said, as if testifying to God. "You may write it down and quote me. Quiet, paid on time, no gentleman upstairs, never the least disturbance." "Did she receive letters?" Pooh inquired. "Plenty, and flowers." The letters were placed in a bureau drawer and the flowers in a milk jug. "From whom?" Mrs. Keating pulled herself up. "Sir, this message is from the postman. He removed them from his bag and placed them in the slot. The names of donors are not my concern." We followed her inside Celeste's room. It was modest, orderly, and, might I say, alive with the ghost of its former occupant. A pair of dance shoes rested on the chair, their ribbons coiled like sleeping snakes. A perfume bottle on the laundry stand, cheap and plucky. A photograph on the mantel. Celeste was in the second row of a chorus line, one leg out, her smile lit up like a lamp. On the dressing table lay a plaster brooch that yearned to be diamonds. Poirot did not rummage. He regarded. He glanced at the bed as if it was about to confess to him. He read the dust like others read print. He whispered order, and the miserable tiny things were all kept in their proper places. The heart that enjoys symmetry also enjoys pleasing and coordinating. She would grin when she wished to deny. O'Malley opened the top drawer with professional disinterest that was nevertheless respectful. There were folded stockings, a packet of letters tied with ribbon, and an envelope with no stamp or postmark on the back. He handed me the loose envelope and Pooh the ribboned packet. The letters on the ribbon were those we'd seen at the precinct, signed J.H. The envelope included one stiff card with a name inscribed on it. "Franklin D. Rock's address is that of a private bank on Wall Street," O'Malley grunted. "Shall leave a calling card in person, like I advised." "Perhaps neither," Poirot said. He had untied the ribbon, fanned the letters, and now chose one near the center. "Remember the dates, Hastings?" I did. "They began in April and went until early July. The script is tidy and manly, with a self-conscious simplicity. There were no endearments, yet the form was intimate and restrained. Dinners accepted, drives proposed, a complaint about unfavorable press coverage, and finally, in the last two letters, an insistence that meetings be held only in discreet locations for both of us. O'Malley replied sourly, "It smells like money and fear." "Fear, sure," answered Poirot. "But of what? The scandal is evident. There is another smell, Trey Ledger." He looked up. "Might we talk to the girl who shared the landing?" Mrs. Keating produced a Miss Kitty Boyle, little and freckled, with a laugh that kept attempting to be courageous but failing at intervals. She had been on the bills at a vaudeville house, had recently taken up cigarette employment, and adored Celeste with the unflappable fidelity of working girls whose coins clinked together. "She was good, Miss LaRue," Kitty stated, tightening and unfastening her hands. She kept herself to herself. "I didn't drink. On a Saturday, all you get is a highball. She wasn't cheap either. If a huge man gazed at her, she looked right back until he realized he had a wife. She was witty in that way." "Did she mention Mr. Rock?" Poirot inquired. Kitty's gaze shifted back and forth between O'Malley and herself. "She spoke of a wealthy person who was set in his ways. Never mentioned his name. Said the papers had previously caused mischief and would do it again if given the opportunity. Celeste, on the other hand, asserted her ability to care for herself. New York is a village," she said. "They chatter, and when they get weary, they talk about somebody else." J.H. Poirot held up the ribboned letters. Kitty colorful. "That was Mr. Harrow." "Harrow," I exclaimed involuntarily. "John Harrow," Kitty said, "works downtown. Not a banker like the huge guy. Clerky, but nice. He'd walk Celeste to the corner sometimes, so the boys at the soda place wouldn't bother. I brought her a book once." Poems, if you believe. They call her Malay. Celeste enjoyed a poem that rhymed. Said life was difficult enough without losing the rhyme. Ali scribbled. Have you ever seen Harrow here? Kitty admitted once or twice. Never. Even though the paper was not in front of him, he had a look on his face that indicated he had already signed on the dotted line. Celeste called him a sweetie, but Kitty hesitated. She claimed he was serious. Too serious for her. She desired. Kitty's courageous laugh returned, but faltered again. She desired brightness. Poirot nodded as if the sum had been balanced. He carefully replaced the letters, giving the impression that he had taken what they had to offer. He approached the wardrobe. 2 black and blue gowns, a well-brushed winter coat, a hat with a little veil and a small rectangle of pasteboard tucked into the coat's pocket. He said he had a ticket for the ferry to Hoboken. Ali's head came up. Why Hoboken? Poirot explained that New York likes not to be trapped in its own reflections. One travels somewhere where there are less eyes. He gave the ticket to the inspector. Dated 3 days ago. It could be any errand, Ali remarked, but he didn't appear to believe himself. Okay, we'll inquire down by the slips. Poirot lingered at the washstand as we were leaving. The cheap perfume bottle stood there, its label simultaneously proud and humiliated. He didn't touch it. Instead, he bent down to the porcelain dish beneath him and drew a tiny smear of something dark and glossy from the rim with the tip of his little finger. Lipstick, I said, but look at the color. It's practically brown. The bottle on the table is pink. Different hues, different moods. Nonetheless, our Mademoiselle Larue prefers the economics abroad. Why keep 2 when 1 would suffice? O'Malley shrugged. She had a pal. They get dressed together and share. Possibly, said Poirot, or perhaps not. On the pavement. The afternoon had slipped into that hour when New York grows impatient for its own night, and men in hats moved like deliberate chessmen, while girls in coloche caps held to their laughing, like a ticket that may yet be checked at the door. We turned towards the river. O'Malley inquired at the ferry office, with the arid efficiency of a man watering a stone. The ticket collector recalled nothing, but a woman at a newspaper kiosk did. Pretty girl, black outfit, tiny hat. I met a fellow by the map. He was worried, checking his watch twice for each time he looked at her. I noticed because he was standing in my shadow. His age? Inquired Poirot. 30s, nor rich nor impoverished, the type who is concerned about his collar. Thank you, Poirot replied solemnly, as if she were singing an aria. You're J.H., I murmured after we had gone a short distance. Perhaps, perhaps not. Pooh's eyes had become small and dazzling beneath his lids. The ferry, the alley, and the chain. Always there's a slight movement out of sight, followed by the spectacular motion. In crime, Hastings, the gesture is typically used to conceal something trivial. We crossed by ferry and walked along the Hoboken waterfront, where the river breeze scraped across our cheeks, like the edge of paper. 10 minutes chat with a patrolman, and we were taken to a small boarding home in a street that had seen better times. Mrs. Loss, the proprietress, was a sharp-eyed, pale woman with hands that knew how to handle laundry and secrets. The fixation on coincidence irritated me. I had the impression I was walking into a pre-written story, albeit the ink may have been different. She initially denied knowledge, exhibiting the hard denial that respectable women adopt when danger smells like headlines. Poe, whose civility is a lever as well as a veil, persuaded, waited, and at last wrung from her the admission that a young girl had come on several afternoons of late. Always alone, always with the same serious young man. Business? Asked Ali. Mrs. Loss raised her bony shoulders. I don't inquire about business. They had a room. They talked. The young girl cried at times, but not always. Names? She paid in cash. I call them as they come, Mr. and Miss. Did you see her last night? Poirot inquired. The woman paused. No, he moaned. Not as a frustrated detective, but as a man who wished to relieve someone's agony, but was unable to do so. And did the young man leave anything? A habit, a word, a habit, she finally murmured, her voice hesitant. He folded his gloves and tucked them inside his hat while speaking, as if he wanted his hands free to ponder. We thanked her and departed. Ali was glowing. All right. So she met a young man who was not raw. Perhaps she was deceiving both of them. Many girls do, plenty, Pooh agreed mildly. But not this one. She is orderly. She maintains her belongings neat. In her letters, she keeps the ribbon level. She refused to disperse her affections like confetti. He slowed. No, she is a girl attempting to avoid the sounds. Nonetheless, the cacophony found her. We got to the end of the block, where the river disrupted our view with its flat black argument. Poirot stood there, head tilted slightly to one side. "We must see Mr. Harrow," he stated, "and we must see Mr. Rock. But we shall approach one with politeness and the other with provocation." "Provoke?" I said, surprised. Poirot stated that a powerful man will not tell you a falsehood with care. He'll whack you with it. When he does, pay attention to what comes out of his sleeve. Back in Manhattan, Ali dispatched a guy to retrieve John Harrow from his office. We waited in a small room filled with files that smelled like glue and remorse. Harrow arrived, looking precisely as Miss Kitty had described, serious to the point of apology. He was in his early 30s, skinny, and had the kind of honest expression that a mother would trust with a rent envelope. When he noticed the letters on the table, his color went. "Where did you in her drawer?" remarked Ali. "Sit down, Mr. Harrow." He took caution, as if the chair would complain. His hands were folded on his knee. After a time, he removed his gloves, folded them, and tucked them into his hat. Poirot's eyes are partly closed. "You were fond of Miss Larue," Poirot remarked softly. "So yes," Harrow replied, a single word devoid of theatrics. "Did you see her last night?" Harrow's gaze shifted away from the inspector and toward the window, as if the city might offer him an alibi. "No, Mr. Harrow," Ali said, and the name came out like a charge. "If you lie to me, I will turn your life upside down and shake it." Harrow closed his eyes. "I went to the ferry," he explained. "I waited. She did not come. I walked. I ended up by the river on our side, and then I returned home." "At what time?" stated Poirot. 12:30. "Perhaps closer to 1. "Anyone who saw you?" "No, why the ferries?" asked Poirot quietly. "She asked me." He looked up, and the nakedness in his face appealed to me. She was afraid. Not for herself. Yes, for both herself and me. She mentioned that there was difficulty. She did not say what. Only that she was going to put something right, and then he faltered, we could discuss put something right, repeated Poirot, and for that she goes not to the police, nor to the priest, nor even to the friend who is kind, to a place where ladies cry in private rooms. His voice was neither harsh nor pitying. It was the voice of a surgeon naming an illness. "Did you know of another man?" Harrow swallowed. Everyone knew there was somebody. She would not say who. She only claimed he was too huge to move. These were her words. And that if she spoke his name, I'd be hurt. Ali snorted. "Roar." "No," Harrow said with a sudden passionate exactitude. "She didn't say, and I don't know." Poe arose. "Mercy misses your Harrow. Be in your rooms. We will ask for you again." O'Malley exhaled after he left. "There it is. Triangle, drowning, and scandal. We pick up a rock. We squeeze." Poe shook his head. "We do not squeeze the tiger. We tempt him to reveal his claws. Send him word, Inspector, that a foreign detective is spreading false information about the monogrammed case and the broken chain in the newspapers. What good will that do? It will cause an activity. Actions, unlike alibis, cannot be rehearsed." He turned to me with a clean finality. "That suggests he's already chosen the next scene. Come, Hastings, we'll return to the Silver Gull at the club, may we? There is a dressing-room corridor, an alley, and between them a stairway where a chain was broken. Someone replaces items after a storm. His mustache is portrayed as punctuation. It is time to look for what has been cleaned." Chapter 4. Clean up the scene. The Silver Gull was closed throughout the day, its gleam dulled by barred doors and empty barrels on the sidewalk. Inside, however, there was life. The manager, a pinched person with eyes as pointed as the corners of his collar, greeted us with a terrible attitude. "I told the police everything last night." Girl went out the back and didn't return. "We found her in the water. It's a sad business, but it's not my fault." Pooh stretched his palms in a sign of modest acquiescence. "We merely intrude a little. But you understand, monsieur, that order is quite important at an entertainment establishment. Tables here, chairs there. Girls are arranged precisely so. A disruption. It leaves a trace." Nespa, the man, sniffed. "The only traces I want to leave are of paying customers." Nevertheless, he allowed us to pass. In daylight, the club was a skeleton of itself. Without the orchestra and the smoke, the large room appeared little, the tables inexpensive and the lamps ludicrous. Even the stage looked dingy with its sequins faded. Poirot strolled slowly down the length of it, glancing at the scuffed floor, before turning into the corridor that led to the dressing rooms. A janitor was mopping there, and a pungent odor of disinfectant rose around us. Poirot paused, his nose wrinkled. Voila, the cleaning has already begun, but geometry cannot be removed with a mop. I followed his gaze. The service stair, tiny and steep, led to the alley. On the third step, there was a small discoloration darker than the surrounding wood. Poirot bended without contact. A droplet dries, not wine. The pattern suggests something spilled from above, possibly during the struggle. The janitor whispered, "Detectives are always seeing what isn't there." Poirot ignored him. "Come, Hastings, let us examine the girl's last resting place before the river took her." We stepped into the alleyway. By daylight it was much less appealing. Litter in the corners, barrels awaiting collection, and a dull clang from the L overhead. Poirot examined the wall near the door. "See, Hastings, a smear that is faint but distinct. She was pushed here with force." The cigarette case toppled. Then she was pulled or carried to the river. "Dragged?" I asked. "Observe the parallel narrow scrapes in the dust, caused by her shoes' heels. The dirt reveals a story." We returned indoors. Poirot asked to inspect the girls' changing rooms. The management objected, but O'Malley, who had joined us, said that it was police business. The door was open. The room had a row of mirrors, their bulbs unlit, and a faint whiff of powder hung in the air. Trifles lay on the dressing tables. Rouge jars, combs, and a ladder-topped stocking. Poirot stood still, as if expecting a revelation. With a small exclamation, he pointed to the far end. "Hastings, what are you seeing?" I observed nothing out of the ordinary. A half-opened closet housing costumes. Poirot approached it, brought out a frock of glittering silver material, and held it up. The sequins caught the faint light. "This is not hers," he explained. "Do you remember when Celeste last danced in black? Yet here is a suit that is still somewhat warm from wear, hung away in haste. Another girl may have worn it. But look at that hem." I bent. There was a thin, uneven brown stain down the edge. "Blood," I whispered. "Perhaps the rouge is from a shattered compact. But consider your haste, Hastings. Someone returns here after the death. Changing clothes conceals a mark, and the murderer cleans." O'Malley's jaws constricted. "Poirot was uttered by one of the other girls at the time, or someone who entered by this entrance. Consider this, Inspector. You do not have to be a dancer to enter a dressing room. We interviewed 2 cigarette girls who had known Celeste. Their tales were similar. She was admired, envied a little, but not despised. She had often expressed her desire to be free. One recalls Celeste recently revealing her intention to depart New York. She stated it would be a week or 2 at most. To go where? Poirot asked. She didn't say anything except that it would be far. The girl's eyes expanded. She claimed she had money saved. Poe made a note, O'Malley murmured as we returned to the blue-shadowed corridor, possibly fleeing with Harrow. But remember, Inspector, she didn't tell him where she went last night. She thought he'd be hurt. We walked back into the daylight. The street was boisterous and indifferent to tragedy. Poirot hesitated, his head tilted. The pattern is clearer. The young man, Harrow, is sincere but impoverished. Raw, the powerful man, is irresponsible around women. However, Celeste did not look at Raw while dancing. None. She gazed everywhere, but it wasn't love or longing. It's fear. Ali expressed fear of being exposed. He is married. She threatens scandal. He panics. Poirot shook his head softly. No. A man like Raw does not panic. He buys, he maintains quiet. He arranges. Murder is untidy. However, there is a lot of clearing up later. It is not in his style. Then who? I asked. Poirot grinned softly. We returned to the initials, Hastings, J.H. He is kind. He is poor. And he's serious. However, in the face of despair, seriousness can become deadly. We must see him again. Ali cursed beneath his breath. If Harrow did it, why throw her into the river? To make it appear like an accident, possibly, or to confuse. Remember, Inspector, that New York has previously known of a girl discovered in the Hudson whose death was never explained. Someone duplicates, believing that history will protect him. Poirot sat up straight with his eyes half closed as we drove back. There is something lacking, something small, exact. When I find it, the picture will be completed. Chapter 5. The case is in order. The precinct room resembled a schoolroom that had chosen to take itself seriously. There was a large table, A row of straight seats, a black ledger, and a clock that ticked as if it were designed to accuse. Inspector Ali sat at the far end, holding the ledger and an unlit cigar. The metropolis hissed on the windows. Poirot had arranged us with as much care as a hostess would set silver. Rock arrived first, accompanied by his huge, flamboyant, and scornful lawyer. John Harrow, pallid and exact, twisted his cap. Kitty boy, little and brave on the point of tears. Mrs. Loss and the Silver Gull's manager are both as defensive as hedgehogs. The landlady stood up straight, hands in her lap, facing a door with a bolt on the inside. Pouveau arrosé. His neatness made the table appear unexpectedly clean as well. "We shall not argue," he told Madame Zurus. "We will merely arrange. When the minor details are in their appropriate locations, the truth settles down by itself." "Make it quick," Roar advised. "Some of us work. Some of us," remarked Poirot cheerfully, "strive extremely hard to stay hidden." He placed a single thing on the table. Celeste's silver cigarette case, with its beautiful chain shattered. "First establish the fact. The chain snapped on the service stair inside the Silver Gull. The linkages have sprung cleanly. The casing is not scuffed. That is a jolt to the wrist in close quarters. A faint smudge from a shoulder strike in the alley can be found on the doorframe by the stair. Drag marks indicate that the heels are not moving. As a result, the assault took place inside rather than at the river. The river is the last convenience, not the scenery." The manager shifted. "Then it was one of the girls," he murmured. "Or a musician." "No," Ali replied quickly. "We checked the band." Poirot tilted his head. "We are concerned with access. Who can be behind the scenes without raising uproar? Staff and those who pose as staff. Someone knows. Someone who delivers notes and collects parcels. Someone that your janitor contacts." He turned to face the manager. "The aunt." The manager swallowed and looked at Mrs. Loss. She did not oblige him with a glance. Roar's attorney cleared his throat. "Is there a charge?" Poirot described it as a table setting. "The charges include the soup course and dessert. I've never seen an adult finance professional look so much like a schoolboy who brought the incorrect book." Poirot's little fingers placed the case so that the light revealed the broken links. "Now take the suspects one by one." "Fair, sir. The newspapers are shouting your name. You are a man accustomed to making preparations. What would you do if you were afraid of what this girl would say?" "Nothing," Rock said with a faint, nasty smile. "Alternatively, hire someone else to do it." "Just so," said Poirot. "You wouldn't touch her in a public place or drag her about in the dirt. Your weapon is a checkbook. The procedure is incorrect." Roar began to talk. His lawyer stepped on his foot. "Muharo." Poirot's tone softened. "You wrote letters. You waited beside the ferry. Your vice is sincerity, not aggression. You have no backstage pass, no bouncer who owes you a favor, and no pattern of going where you don't belong. You are innocent of murder, but guilty of heartache." Harrow's mouth quivered. He bent his head. Kitty stretched for his hand. He let her take it. "And you, Mademoiselle Bolle," continued Poirot, "are familiar with the dressing rooms and alleys. You have the right footprint, if you like. But you lack the motivation and the tidying. You'd have run. You would not have made arrangements." Kitty whimpered. "I couldn't hurt her, even if I occasionally wished I were her." Poe nodded. "Envy is untidy. Unfortunately, this crime was not messy." He finally turned to face Mrs. Loss. She did not show any signs of feeling the room's eyes. Poirot mentioned someone whose trade is discretion. She organizes discreet gatherings. She keeps the identities out of settings where guys understand how to sue. For such a person, order is bread. To her, disarray equals ruin. And our dear Celeste. He stared at the silver case. She threatened disorder. "I made no arrangements." Mrs. Loss stated, "Girls need rooms. Gentlemen pay for their apartments. It's a moral city. One must be practical." "Morality," Poirot whispered, "is frequently a list of other people's mistakes. Let us continue with the facts." He picked up a little card. The ferry ticket found in Celeste's coat. She planned to leave. She told Kitty that she had money saved. She intended to be free, possibly for the first time in her life. She also possessed Monsieur's thoughtless notes, which were appointments rather than endearments. With them, she could talk about him and the woman who kept the introduction ledger. If she talked, whose life would be smashed? What about the bankers? He denied that the girl would be produced. The landlady is hauled through the courts. Mrs. Loss's mouth twitched. You've read the newspapers, she explained. They always find a woman to blame. Ah, acknowledged Poirot. But tonight we seek not blame, but cause. Rose snorted. Stop the sermon. If you're going to name her, do it. Patience, Poirot gently stated. I have one more little thing, the smallest of all and therefore the most telling. He turned to face O'Malley. Inspector, when we initially met Madame Loss, what did she say about Monsieur Harrow? O'Malley's brow wrinkled. That was about his gloves, he explained. How he folds them into his hat as he speaks. Poirot said, exactly. Celeste never went on the ferry. Madame, on the other hand, spoke of Clark's little habit with his gloves as if she were standing next to him. How could she know? Because she followed Celeste to the club and returned to find Harrow waiting, restless and squirming. She saved the detail, as neat souls do, and then betrayed herself by repeating it to us later. I watch out for my boarders, Mrs. Loss remarked calmly. It is a rough neighborhood. There's also the tiny matter of lipstick, which Poirot mentioned almost regretfully, as if he were talking laundry. In Celeste's room on the washstand, there was a faint brown stain that was not Celeste's. Hers was pink. A paradox, but only if the room belonged to a single woman. On certain afternoons, that room was occupied by Celeste and the woman who came to tidy and counsel. Madame Loss still wears her old shade. The girls don't. It's a minor detail, but it serves as a bridge in the imagination between the girl's private existence and the public area where she died. It demonstrates connectivity. It represents proximity and belongs to the woman who can't stop herself from organizing things. Lipstick, Roar's lawyer scoffed. You base a murder on a smear of color. Poirot gently stated that the murder was based on access, motive, and manner. The color just points to the correct woman. The manager of the Silver Gull cleared his throat. I look around, and I've seen Mrs. Loss in the back passages many times. She really does carry messages. Everyone recognizes her. Thank you, monsieur. Poirot went on. Invisible people are best seen by those who also live invisibly. Roar shifted in his chair. If the point is to absolve me, the point, yelled O'Malley for once, losing patience, is to hang the right hat on the right peg. Harrow raised his head. If she's guilty, he added in a tight voice, say it plain. Pooh's eyes softened. He gazed at Mrs. Loss. Madame, he said, I shall be straightforward. You followed Celeste into the club. You passed where you frequently did. You stopped her in the service corridor. Maybe you begged. Maybe you threatened. She resisted. You grabbed her wrist. The chain snapped. She yelled out. You pushed her back against the jam. You silenced her out of panic. When she went limp, you did what you normally do. You kept things tidy. You removed her bracelet, a souvenir, or the idea of erasing a mark. You took the easy way out. You carried her along the alley, where the dust still formed the shape of her heels. The water accepted her, back inside. You fixed what was wrong, and you returned home to your house, which is as spotless as a parlor in a catalogue. Mrs. Loss didn't move. Kitty made a little moan. Harrow's lips parted, then closed again. Is this the part? Rock spoke gently and dangerously. Where do you demand a confession? Pooh shook his head. No, I offer a choice. Madame Loss can deny anything. She can claim that the corridor is filled with spirits, and that the manager remembers the wrong aunt. But it won't matter. The pattern is as it is. It is the pattern of a woman who lives quietly and had once kept too much. For the first time, Mrs. Loss's hands left her lap. She placed them flat on the table, palms down, as if bracing for an earthquake. When she spoke, her tone was low and not theatrical. She would have ruined me, she said. You do not understand what that means. When guys fall, they have nets, clubs, partners, and attorneys. When girls fall, they disappear. When I fall, I see a headline, a cell, and then nothing. I maintained things proper. You may not enjoy the trade, but I kept it clean. No beatings, no dirt, money on time, names not said, and she took a deep breath that sounded like a tear she had resolved not to shed. She laughed. She stated she would tell everything. She did not tell where she would go because she would have nowhere. She would have set the entire home on fire. I couldn't allow her. Harrow half rose. She wanted to live. Mrs. Loss expressed her desire to be free, and tears welled up in her eyes. She dashed it away fiercely. "Do you think I don't know that word? I've been paying rent to it my entire life." I advised her not to be silly. She fought, her mouth constricted. I intended to frighten rather than kill, but it takes little to halt a throat that has sang and laughed for its food. Ali made a move. The two constables stationed at the wall stepped forward. Mrs. Loss stood on her own accord and extended her wrists. At the door, she returned her gaze to Poirot, as if about to say something again, then closed her mouth like a sensible lady closes a drawer. The door closed. Rock stood with a grunt and informed his lawyer that they were leaving. Kitty began to cry properly, in small folded sobs that tried not to go too far. Harrow looked at the silver case as if it were a cemetery. Poirot collected the items one by one and returned them to his veil. He was really gentle with the broken chain. We stepped out onto a street that had decided to become noisier again. The Hudson lay at the end of the boulevard like a tarnished metal strip. The tug hooted. A boy cried in the evening edition. Someone laughed in an unsettling way, so I responded, "We never learn why she was at the club or how she first fell into that life, or what she would have done if she had got away." "No," Poirot said, "we just learn what is required to place the pieces in their right positions. We know she wanted to go. We know someone wanted her to be silent. Hastings frequently has a rope between these two wishes. Rowe walks away, I lamented bitterly. O'Malley, who was behind us, added, for now. His speech sounded as dry as his ledger. He will not like what happens next. Poirot's gaze followed the river. He said gently, "I am not responsible for balancing all accounts. It is entirely up to me to tell where the hand was and what it did. Men like Raw represent a climate. We dress for them. Women like Madame Loth form a house. We can either enter or knock it down. Celeste was a person. She wanted for a modest, hazardous thing. Freedom." He touched my sleeve. "Come, mon ami, the ship south does not love being late, and crime is a traveler with multiple tickets." We strolled towards the river lights. Behind us the city resumed its appetite. The water in front of us rose and fell with the patience of a sleeping chest. Music, and so ends Poirot and the Lady of the Hudson, a story of city lights and shadowed apartments, where discretion kept its own ledger and the river carried more than just reflections. We wrote this narrative in homage to Agatha Christie, inspired by the genuine unsolved case of Mary Rogers, but completely original in its presentation. If you've listened until the end,